Good morning, everyone. My name is Yantong, and I'm from University Malaya. I'm happy to share my research with you today. My presentation is titled Exploring the Link, Teachers' Efficacy, Student Motivation, and Student Academic Outcomes in Music Education across Heilongjiang universities. And my presentation will include research background and significant literature review, methodology, and key findings, discussion, conclusion, and recommendations. Okay, let's start with the first part. Why this research matters in music education? Firstly, we already know from studies such as Bandura and Capra that teachers with higher efficacy have a positive impact on student motivation and academic performance in general education. But in music education, it's different from general education. Teaching music involves more than just helping students master skills. It also requires the development of creativity, emotional expression, and a strong inner drive, which is unique to music education. Despite these differences, most previous research have mainly focused on the general education settings, specifically the role of teachers' efficacy and student motivation in music education hasn't been explored in depth, especially in the context of China. Therefore, what is missing in current research is clear understanding of how teachers' efficacy specifically impacts music students' academic outcomes. And why this research is necessary? My study aims to fill the gap by exploring how music teachers' self-efficacy influences their students' motivation and academic achievement. Through this study, we can help improve teacher training programs, create better learning strategies, and inform education policy to enhance music education outcomes in China. Although many studies support the positive role of teachers' efficacy, researchers still have different viewpoints regarding its effects, specifically in music education. On one hand, many scholars argue that teachers with highest efficacy usually provide better teaching, which then leads to improved student outcomes. This perspective is supported by intensive research conducted in general educational settings. Additionally, these scholars believe students' motivation often acts as an important mediator, meaning teachers' efficacy indirectly improves academic outcomes by enhancing student motivation. On the other hand, other researchers have argued against assuming that such positive relationship always hold true in music and art education setting. They point out there may not be a consistent connection between teachers' efficacy and student success in music education. And they also suggest that teachers who feel overly confident might become less flexible and adaptable. Moreover, these researchers highlight that cultural and contextual factors can significantly influence this relationship. Thus, considering these conflicting views, we can identify a clear research gap. The effects of teacher self-efficacy and the student motivation in music education, especially within non-Western countries, such as China, remain inconclusive and underexplored. My research aimed to address this gap, providing more clarity on this important issue. And based on the research gap, I developed a clear conceptual framework to guide my study. This framework shows that teachers' efficacy could directly influence student academic achievement, but it also impacts achievement indirectly through student motivation. Therefore, my research specifically has two main objectives. First, to analyze the relationship between teachers' efficacy and student academic achievement in higher music education in Heilongjiang province. Second, to explore the mediating effect of student motivation on the relationship between teachers' efficacy and student academic achievement. And by clearly examining those objectives, this research can help us better understand how and why teachers' beliefs in their teaching abilities affect students' outcomes in music education. And then let me briefly discuss the method I used for this research. Firstly, I adopted a mixed method design. Specifically, I conducted quantitative surveys and classroom observations. In total, 80 music teachers and 255 students from 3 universities in Heilongjiang province participated in this study. And for the instrument, I used the 3 reliable instruments: teacher's efficacy scale, motivation scale, and academic achievement inventory. And finally, to analyze the collected data, I used statistical software, and for the qualitative data, I used semantic coding. Now let's move on to my key findings, starting with the quantitative results. First, the quantitative analysis showed no significant direct correlation between teacher efficacy and student academic achievement across all 3 universities. The correlation coefficients were very weak, and none of the results were statistically significant. Additionally, the mediation analysis revealed that student motivation didn't mediate the relationship between teacher's efficacy and student academic achievement. In other words, student motivation wasn't the connecting factor that we first accepted. And from the qualitative classroom observation, teachers with higher self-efficacy clearly created a classroom that we were more interactive, lively, and engaging for students. However, increased classroom engagement didn't translate into improved grades. And specifically for students who were struggling academically, frequent interaction with these confident teacher didn't notably enhance their understanding or academic performance. And therefore, the key takeaway from these findings is clear. Teachers who feel confident in their teaching abilities indeed create more engaging classroom environments. However, the engagement alone doesn't necessarily lead to improve academic outcomes. We need to explore additional factors to support students' academic success effectively. And finally, let me summarize the conclusion and the implications. First, we find that the teacher's efficacy definitely enhances classroom engagement, making lessons more interactive and lively. However, higher engagement alone didn't lead to better academic performance. And secondly, we discovered student motivation didn't mediate or bridge the relationship between teacher's efficacy and student academic achievement. This means motivation wasn't the key connecting factor we first accepted. Finally, the classroom interactions we observed, although very positive, didn't ensure that students' academic performance improved. So, what does this mean for practice? Firstly, teacher training on self-efficacy shouldn't only focus on increasing teachers' confidence, but more importantly, emphasize teaching instructional strategies that effectively support students' learning. And secondly, we need a more comprehensive approach to music education that integrates curriculum, support assessment reforms, and student-centered learning strategies. Simply put, we must give students more targeted help and resources. Lastly, these findings clearly suggest the need for context-sensitive interventions in music education. It's essential to consider specific culture and educational context when designing program to enhance student achievement. By applying these implications, educators and policymakers can create a better support system for both teacher and student in music education. This brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments you may have. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.